Welcome everyone to Supporting Your Student Through Academic Planning and Course Registration. This is one of our summer series of Tulane parent webinars that has been designed for families of incoming new students. So we're very happy you've joined us tonight, and I'm so glad that I can introduce you to my wonderful colleague, Heather Cooper, who is the Associate Director of the College Advising team, and she's the Associate Director for Student Engagement. So she's going to lead you through her presentation, and then again, hold your questions and we'll get to those at the end.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Penny, so much. This is one of my favorite presentations that we do all year. I can almost feel the anticipation of all of the parents out there. I've already talked to some of you about this big transition and what to expect from the coming months. And so I'm really excited to kind of get this information out there. I know some students have done early decision and been on the list for so long, you all are just dying to know what the next steps are. So tonight, my focus really is to talk you through all of it. Supporting your student through academic planning and course registration is my main goal. To welcome parents of new students is my other goal. And really just to give you an overview of what to expect from the fall registration process and summer advising meetings that your students will have with our office this summer. We will review the structure of our first year advising team at Tulane, and you'll get to learn how to support your student as they prepare for their appointments, explore their options, and complete fall registration this summer. My name again is Heather Cooper. My official title is Associate Director of Student Engagement in College Advising within Newcomb-Tulane College, which is the undergraduate home to all residential Tulane full-time students. A little bit about me. I've worked with advising for over a decade here at Tulane, and I really love advising and working with students. I'm at a point in my career where I get to advise advisors and support the team. So I truly feel that I have about 8,000 of my own students to kind of usher through the learning process that is college here on campus. So I'm, again, really excited to be here tonight, but just excited for this opportunity to reach as many of you as possible. So some of the things I want to touch on tonight include just what is our advising model here at Tulane, what is the core curriculum, and how can we explore different majors? What is a typical first semester schedule? What will registration, the nuts and bolts of registration, actually look like for your student? How these summer appointments that you've been hearing about will be run, and your role in that. Penny and her office and family programs have always been great partners to us, but one of the taglines I've always used from Penny has been parents as partners. So my focus as an advisor, our office's focus is to support your student. And unlike high school, your student drives the academic pursuits that they're under. We don't send you report cards. Those kind of things don't happen kind of automatically in the way they do in high school. And so parents are often renegotiating how they're identifying with their student and how they're identifying with their role as a support for the student. So I have a couple tips and tricks. Obviously, this webinar is only about 45 minutes, so we could go on all day about some of these topics, but these are the things I really want to be sure we touch on, including giving you a few resources to help move you forward and get you started. So first things first, the advising model at Tulane. So as I mentioned, my office is college advising. We live in Newcomb-Tulane College, which is the undergraduate arm of the university. We have 3 distinct teams within college advising. Those of you on this call are going to have students who are with a first year advisor. First year advising team was concocted and created at Tulane just last year. Many universities have a first year team, but the passion and the work behind that team is to have 6 concerted advisors who are focused on not just kind of what should a first-year student take, but what does a first-year student need to truly transition to college. Our advisors are undergoing coaching, training, and learning how to work with students and communicate with them in really deep and meaningful ways, in addition to understanding our curriculum and kind of the nuts and bolts of policy and catalog things. So our first year advising team is something that is really near and dear to my heart as we develop this model. And we've had some really great success with students getting the support they need in the last year. And we have lots of places we want to grow and things we want to try with your students as they come onto campus this coming year as well. The 2 other teams that we have within our office are our college advising or core advisor teams. And these teams kind of splinter off and support students either in business and science or within professional degrees like public health, architecture, and liberal arts. So these are 2 separate teams that students will kind of be reassigned to after they finish their work with our first year team. So by the second year, they'll have a new advisor and get supports that will get them through graduation and help them look at the even bigger picture as they plan sophomore year and beyond. Other supports within advising. So this is where what is advising gets really wild here on Tulane's campus, right? We have lots of support. So who's the advising and what? The college advisor is assigned to your student when they, in the summer before they start with us, and we will always have somebody in our office assigned to your student within college advising. Other advising supports will be driven by your student in terms of making the connections. They're not always assigned to students, but they're always available to students to meet with them. The big ones that see the most traffic is our pre-professional advisors. Those are our advisors within my office here in college advising who work exclusively with pre-law and pre-health students to make sure that they have the best applications possible moving forward towards graduation and post-graduation. They actually continue to work with some students as they start their application processes after they've graduated from Tulane in some cases. But first year is never too early to start these conversations with our pre-professional advisors to be sure that students are maximizing their time here on campus with their coursework and with their research opportunities. We also have fellowship advisors who are a whole office to focus just on fellowship advising for those postgraduate fellowship scholarships that are very popular, Fulbright, Rhodes, those kinds of things. Since having this office, we've grown exponentially in terms of Tulane turning out students who have access to these wonderful post-grad scholarship opportunities. We've got study abroad advisors, special cohorts throughout campus. Your student, if they're part of one, will know. And we have career and success coaches as 2 separate offices here within Newcomb-Tulane College. So a lot of different resources, which of course at first can be a little overwhelming, but it's always a good idea to start with your college advisor to kind of figure out what you need next. So many of your calls or emails are often around this time, either from you or your students, about what are the requirements? How does this work? Now, again, that could be a whole webinar in and of itself. And I'm not going to be able to cover everything that's covered in our core curriculum, but rest assured, you should know this. Your student does have a set of kind of general ed or core curriculum requirements that every Tulane student will take. Those are owned by Newcomb-Tulane College, and they're supported by our office to make sure students are becoming well-rounded students by the time they leave Tulane. The other thing a student needs besides finishing the core curriculum in order to graduate is the completion of a single major at minimum. And the last thing they need to graduate is a minimum number of requirements. Most degrees require 120 credits. Some degrees require a little more. It's very important that your student is always aware of what core curriculum requirements that they have left, what major requirements they have left, and how many credits overall they have left. And don't worry, I'm not here to give you anxiety. We will help them with that process and tools that they need to know that information. But if you're interested in your student graduating in 4 years, as is the current plan, those 3 things are really integral to the work that I do, even as we support holistically your whole student. So the core curriculum is basically, in a nutshell, made of 3 different buckets. We have proficiency requirements, meaning things that you have to get to a certain level of in order to finish, like writing or foreign language acquisition. We have distribution requirements. These are the requirements that ensure that all of our students are well-rounded and take a little science, a little liberal arts, a little humanities, and a little arts during their time here, regardless of their majors. And then we have some Tulane specific requirements, lovingly known as additional requirements, things like our public service requirement, race and inclusion, and global perspectives. That's really all you need to know. But there are a few cheats that are helpful to know as you kind of support your student through understanding what a core curriculum is. A lot of questions right now are around how will credits I already have earned apply towards the core curriculum. So essentially you're asking what's already done so I can move on. Well, just so you know, any credits from outside, AP, IB, possible A-level credits can, in some cases and most cases, count towards the proficiency requirement. So students with English credit might have a first-tier writing class that they may test out of, but they will have a different writing class that they'll have access to, perhaps within their major. Some students will test out of or have requirements covered with AP with their language requirement. So in most cases, the proficiency requirement does accept AP credit to some degree, but again, job security for my office, this takes a little work with an advisor and a little bit of an understanding of our tools to make sure they understand how it applies and what's left after it has applied. AP credits and credits from tests in high school do not count toward our distribution requirement. So if your student has a lab science requirement that they took in high school and they have credit for it, it will still count toward their overall degree. It might even count toward their major. It's just not going to count towards that core curriculum. They will need to take a college level lab science at Tulane or at least at a college for transfer credit. AP and so those are the main things to understand. Proficiency and distribution requirements, they do not overlap. So if something is a language class, it is not also going to be a humanities class. They will need to take something separate for those things. And again, the computer and the little audit that shows them on their progress will know these things and help them. So those are the tools we're going to lean into as I teach your students kind of how to manage this information. The core curriculum is the beauty of it, while it's a little hard to explain at first, is that it's really flexible and it does often overlap with lots of different majors and minors. So if your student happens to be very interested in both sciences and liberal arts, it's quite possible that they'll cover through what they are required to take for those different majors, that they'll cover a lot of their core curriculum. So a lot of students will walk into these appointments this summer and say, well, I want to make sure I check off all the core curriculum stuff. Well, that's good, but I'm going to say, let's start with your major interests just so that we can make sure we move forward, because it's near impossible to take something in your first year that doesn't check a box of a core curriculum requirement. And if your student doesn't know what their major is, that's okay. We're going to help them explore these different majors kind of through the core curriculum. And what is really important to us is that they're choosing classes that are most interesting to them over checking off boxes, which is a lot different also from high school in many, many ways. So be prepared to hear about us asking them what they're actually interested in. Those things are going to be really important in our coming conversations this summer. and throughout the 4 years that your student is here. So the other big question that's on the table right now is, what is a typical first year schedule? Generally, this is a little picture of a planner. You might have already seen this if you've been respectfully hunting over your child's shoulder, but this is kind of a planner where students will actually add interest classes to our class schedule information and kind of build out what they think they might like to take, or and what format it should be in. So this is just a snapshot of what a schedule will look like once they've actually registered or been registered. The most important thing that the schedule will include is balance. That's my first and foremost is it balanced across their interests, their skills, and their class size? I know that you all have really motivated students, but if your student has never taken calculus or chemistry and then they come in and say, I want to be an engineer, then there are classes that we want to move them forward in, but we also want to make sure that there's some scaffolding to make sure that they're not just like jumping in the deep end without any safety net. So it's going to be really important for me, and I'm going to be asking them and having my advisors ask your students, what are you interested in? How's your background in that? How confident do you feel in those things? It's okay to be challenged, but we don't want them to drown. 15 to 17 credits is generally the right amount of credits for a first semester schedule. And this is just mathematically true that if you're here for 8 semesters and you need 120 credits to graduate, that's exactly 15 credits per semester. The reason we like 15 credits in a given semester, even if you have some other credits that you're bringing in from elsewhere, is because 12 credits is the minimum full time. So while starting at 12 credits might seem like a good idea if you've got some AP credit you're bringing with you, it doesn't allow you any flexibility if you get in trouble at midterms. So I don't love 12 credits as a starting point, but I'm happy for you to start at 15, 16 credits, and then as the academic calendar moves forward, make some thoughtful decisions about schedule changes if that midterm time or those periods, if a class or schedule is a little more than you expected or your student expected. Typical schedules will also require prerequisites. I have so many students who come in and they're so excited and they show me the classes they're interested in, and they're all like graduate level classes. I love that. I'm really excited about that, but we got to roll it back just a little bit and get to some of those intro level classes that are going to cover a lot of those topics in a short period of time. So we are here to kind of talk reason into those schedules a little bit as needed. Major and minor interests are definitely going to be on the schedules and any additional room that we have for NTC core curriculum requirements. Like I said, most of the time, what they need for the NTC core is taken care of by their major interests or other things that they want to take. So what does registration look like this summer? Students have already done some things or gotten started with some things. So they all received May modules or links to May modules from our first year experience team. Those May modules, the part that includes advising was hand built by myself and my colleagues with the first year advising team to make sure students have as much information as appropriate right now. Not all the information because that's overwhelming. But they've started working on the May modules. They've ideally, 1,300 of them, according to the registrar this morning, has completed a major interest survey from the registrar's office that will help us take anything that's changed from the admissions applications and update it to the more current focus that your students has on their academic plan. And we've also asked them to start completing an advising registration worksheet that's built into the May modules and language placement forms that's linked from the modules if they're interested in a language class in their first semester. So these are all things that your student may have already heard about, things that students are going to be experiencing in the next I'm not looking at the calendar, in the next few weeks. I'm always living like 4 weeks ahead and a few weeks behind, depending on the project in front of me. So your students are going to be pre-registered in a full semester of classes for their first semester only. The university has chosen to do this to make sure that there is an even number of classes and an even number of courses available to all students for their given curriculum. So the reason we've asked them to fill out these major interest forms is to help drop them in to classes that relate to those majors that they're interested in. If your student is exploratory, they'll get an exploration set of classes. And believe me, I've, again, kind of hand-built this particular model and worked very closely with Tulane's registrar's office to make sure that there is a balance between availability, subject areas, and I've had my entire advising team looking at this to make sure that this is the best possible set of classes for your student. That said, they're going to get pre-registered in their current major interest by early June. That's the goal. They're going to then receive an email from our office after pre-registration to schedule an appointment. Our appointments this summer will run between June 10th and July 12th. So that means your student will have an opportunity within that 3 to 4 week period to meet with a team of advisors who will work in small groups with our students. And they will need to book a registration appointment with us when they receive that email, and then they will attend the meeting on their own. So as much as we love your feedback, parents, the way you can support your student is to have good conversations with them before and after these meetings, but we ask that you don't attend these meetings as your student kind of figures out how to drive this vehicle on their own. So during our summer appointments, like I said, they're going to book their advising appointment in early June. They're going to complete those pre-advising worksheets in May. And they're going to get pre-registered in early June by both advising and the registrar's office. When will they be able to make changes? Can they make changes? Absolutely. But they will access their changes on the day of their scheduled appointment between June 10th and July 12th. So during that time, when we meet with your students, we will open their registration. The registration will remain open for changes either during the meeting. I expect that there will be changes during the meeting. Then we will show them how to operate the schedule of classes, how to add things, how to drop things, how to switch sections of things, how to search things on our class schedule. I expect that they'll do that during the meeting. They might even do that into the evening, working with you or making changes or finalizing their language placement and adding things. So we'll give each student a window of 72 hours to make changes during this registration period specifically. After 72 hours, your student's registration will be closed temporarily until all of the rest of the students have registered and finished having access to their schedule over those kind of 4 weeks that I discussed. At that time, they will then be able to make any changes they want all the way through the first 2 weeks of classes, known as our add period, after July 13th. So after everybody has had an opportunity to meet with us and register and make shifts in their schedule as needed, then everybody will kind of have access to the registration and be able to make changes if they need to. This is different than past years. So if you have older students who have attended Tulane, try to make sure your student is asking us and not their older student for the full rundown of what these appointments will look like. This is a different process, but I'm really excited about this process. We've taken a lot of care and thought and put it into this process. Our main goal during our appointments this summer are to make sure your student is fully registered in that kind of 15, 17 credit sweet spot, and to be ready and know how to make any necessary changes that they might need come July 13th as the summer rolls on. And that's our main goal, just that they leave those appointments with registration fully committed at that time. So I already touched on this a little about pre-matriculation credit. That's a higher ed speak for credit that you get before you started at our school. Come this summer, your student, and really starting the deposit deadline, your student has matriculated to Tulane. So they are now bound, as our continuing students are, by certain rules and regulations around transfer credit and things like that. But pre-matriculation were things that your student might have done in high school. We have lots of resources on our website for credit equivalencies. So if your student did earn credit for something, you'll know from these different resources that we have on our advising website. Just do a quick Google search of AP/IB chart Tulane, and you'll see that most students, all of our AP credits are issued only for scores of 4s or 5s. All of our IB credits must be high-level classes, and there's different numbers for different tests that are required as the minimum threshold for that credit. Don't ask me to talk too much about A levels, but we do offer credit for some A levels as well. It is important that your student is sending all years of testing to Tulane. So sometimes they know they're going to Tulane and they're taking these final AP tests in the last couple of weeks, and they're just typing in or writing in Tulane to send the scores there. But then we only get the senior AP scores, and maybe we missed the class they took sophomore year in which they did earn a 4 in a certain class. So we want them to be sure that they've sent everything from the College Board website directly to Tulane in case of AP. IB credit gets reported to us as well, but work with your schools to make sure that IB credit gets here in one piece. And in our early meetings with students, we'll always evaluate what students are saying they have and what's actually posted to their record, but that posting really doesn't happen till later in the summer. So those conversations and that checkpoint will happen in the fall. Dual enrollment is very popular among some areas around the country, and students can submit dual enrollment or pre-Tulane college credit to our transfer credit specialist on our website. There's a link. It's an online form. They upload the syllabus and any course descriptions that might be needed. That transfer credit specialist will work with the departments to see if things will transfer as credit or have been approved previously for credit, and then communicate with your student via email as to what else might be needed or what the verdict was for that particular credit. All right, so all of these things will get evaluated as we prepare to meet with your students by the advisor. And we will work with your students during the appointments. Let's say they have AP Calc credit, but they were put and pre-registered in calculus because they were interested in a science major, and that's a good class for a science major. Well, then I would invite that student to drop that calculus class and let's go look for another class that's more appropriate for that student and the trajectory that they're on, whether that puts them in the next class, whether that means they just have room for something different that they wanted to explore. Those are conversations that we'll have as we meet with them this summer. So, what you've all been waiting for, how can you support your student? First of all, you already have, right? They're graduating from high school. They've gotten through this application process. You probably feel like you should already be at the top of the mountain. So you are supporting your student. You're showing up here, you're taking notes, and you're asking questions. I know they're coming. And you've already been calling and reaching out. So you're already supporting your student because you're an adult who understands kind of the bigger framework that college might go into. On the other hand, there's very many things that are different on Tulane's campus than may have been at your institution when you were younger, or you might have a first-generation college student and you just want to make sure that they have everything that they need and all the tools that they need to succeed. First and foremost, I see you all as partners. So it's really important that while I can have a 30-minute meeting with a student and get pretty far in understanding what they need and where they're going, because I do this all day, every day, you know your student the best. And so they might give you more or less, depending on their mood, information about really reflecting on classes that they like in a non-judgmental space, in a calm environment where you can just say, hey, what is it that you really are excited about? I've always seen you reading the newspaper about these topics. Is there a class that relates to that interest? Maybe just for fun, for credits, for balance in your schedule. Yes, you need chemistry. Yes, you need some of these other heavy hitting classes, but are there some other classes that you might enjoy? So really helping them to evaluate, not to second guess or scare them, and not, but to really reflect on like, how do you feel about taking a class like that or balancing the schedule like that? It's your first semester of college. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it's definitely, that conversation is a really big and important step in helping your student fill out these registration worksheets and fill out the surveys. They don't need to know everything right now, but they just need to have thought about it. And having thought about it will make their time with us that much more impactful. Helping your students, and I mean help, showing them the resource and asking them to pick out a few majors or minors that catch their eye. Don't just look at the fun first class that everybody says is great. What about the 9 other classes part of the major? Are you interested in all of them or just that first one? That's a big difference. So thinking about looking at the different majors and minors that Tulane actually offers on our catalog, which we link to on the next slide. But our catalog has become a really important resource for all students to really search through and look at what we actually offer and what's actually possible. And that doesn't mean that something they're interested in that Tulane doesn't offer can't be kind of found. We can't find connections, because we can. And if they bring that to us early on, then we can start looking for those connections. Like, well, we don't have this major, but we do have this over here and a couple classes in this area, and they're really good skill building classes, and they will complement this other thing that you're interested in. How to have conversations with your student about their academic plans that may require additional time or expense. You might not be having that conversation today, but over their time at college, it's important to think about, is summer school ever an option? Is study abroad going to work out? If study abroad does work out, how do they want to manage their time before and after that, so that they're making good choices about things and resources that they're putting into this entire college experience. This second to last one, I really can't emphasize enough. I see a lot of registration stress over the last decade of my work with students, and I guess if I could say one thing, it's kind of trust the process. You do have to be persistent and pay attention to the registration process. You can't just wake up the first day of classes and say, like, what do I sign up for? But this fall, we're going to help your student register by getting them pre-registered and then helping them make changes. In the future, they're going to be building those entire 5-class schedules. So waking up the day of registration is not going to be as useful as coming into advising early, talking about what next semester might look like, even if you're not kind of thinking about next semester. But reminding your students to constantly be patient and flexible. If a ton of students need something to, there's a lot of demand on a particular class that everyone needs, like calculus, you can trust that our advisors are letting upper leadership know, and upper leadership is talking to the School of Science and Engineering and the math department about creating more classes for that. So if students need something, generally Tulane is going to kind of adjust and help get them there. Not always going to be in the first semester, but it's certainly never going to be in a way that doesn't allow them to graduate on time or anything like that. They will work with us. So letting your students know that it's okay to kind of be flexible, it's okay to be patient, but it is also important to be persistent and let people know what they need, because they never know, you know, when we are going to offer a new section of a class, or be letting departments know that that class is needed. So remaining flexible, having lots of options of backup options for classes, especially when you're exploring, is better than having one thing. My favorite is when students walk in and say, I want to major in math. And I was like, well, you can take calculus. So now we need the 4 other classes. So you can't just take all 5 math classes, right? So having that list of options, being flexible, opening the mind a little bit, those things are really going to be helpful. And helping them manage their expectations, that if 50 people have told them about a particular professor and at registration time, they find out that that professor has a wait list of 10 people, 20 people, then that's likely the outcome of many people knowing about a particular professor. So not that they won't get to take that professor, but it will be, might have to be something they wait on if it's that important to them to take a class in that environment with that person. So kind of managing the expectations that everything's not going to come the very first semester, but that little by little, they're going to make progress through this academic journey that they're on. And they should always feel free, not just to reach out to their assigned advisor, but to reach out to our entire team. So that's really, really important to me, and a bit of a culture shift. I think people have felt over the years tethered to their individual advisor, which is wonderful, but it also doesn't give our team an opportunity to shine, and it can, if an advisor moves or changes jobs or moves up and changes positions or changes teams, then students take that very personally. And we just want people to know that even as changes happen in our office, our team is here, and we're going to make sure that your students have the support they need, even if their individual advisor is sick that day or something like that. So if your student says, Mom, I can't make an appointment, my advisor's out of office today. Okay, have you reached out to the team? And let's see what other options are available, or can that wait until tomorrow or until that person returns to office? Maybe it's not as pressing today. All that being said, we're here, you're here, and your job is to be just a sounding board and a support for your students. So I know you're eager to get to questions, so I just want to end with a couple resources here, links to some things I've talked about. The first link is a link to the academic calendar. As you can imagine, in academic advising, academic calendar is pretty important to the ebb and flow of our office. The last date to be able to add a class, the last date to be able to drop a class without record, the last day to withdraw from a class altogether. Those dates matter to our workflow, and your students do need to make decisions along that timeline. So honestly, if nothing else, besides getting your student to check their Tulane email, if you can just print out the academic calendar for them and discuss, hey, look, this is the last date you have to add a class. This is the last date you have to drop a class. If they're concerned and telling you everything about a concern that they're having with a class, remind them that there is a decision deadline, and they need to think about that with an advisor early and not wait till the end of the semester after trying to power through. I'm not saying they're always going to make the perfect decisions again, but this is the beginning of learning that. And the academic calendar is a really useful tool for that. The class schedule, that's where we get to do all our registration work this summer with your student. That's where their classes will be added and dropped for the next 4 years. So they should start getting used to the class schedule. You might even like to geek out and press on the little question mark that shows all the ins and outs of how to use the system, but we'll also be demonstrating that for your student in our meetings this summer. The catalog, as I mentioned, will list all majors and minors for NTC undergraduate students. I definitely recommend using the filters, so your student isn't kind of looking at a bunch of programs in the med school at the graduate level, for example. Those are going to be harder to access at this point in time. Our advising website has lots of information, but right now your focus can be the advising website for incoming students. I've got frequently asked questions there. We've got information that is kind of always being updated there as we continue to field your questions and hear from you and things like that. So please use our website. And the FERPA form is the educational record form that allows students to name adults in their lives, legal guardians, parents who might need to access their student information because of by way of supporting their students. Like I said earlier, students are the only ones with access to their records, to their grades. We won't be sending anything out, but the FERPA form, if this is an important to you, one of the best things that I think students and parents can do before college starts is have a conversation about how they plan to manage their academic records. I do not recommend that you have their password and their emails, but I do recommend that you all have kind of an agreement as to what information that's important to you to know as they progress through college. And if filling out a FERPA form is very important to you all as a family, that is something that your student needs to fill out with us and give to us from their Tulane email so that we can process it and allow whoever they have named access, not like I give you the password, but so we can have conversations about how to support your students with explicit details. All right. I have overspoken, but I'm officially done with my presentation. So I'm going to hand things over to Penny to help field our end of term questions.
So we already have a couple of questions, and families, if you have some more, then please start submitting those. Let's answer these first couple. They might be the ones that you have in mind as well. So the deadline for completing the May module of their first year experience modules, it's the end of May. I would say if there are extenuating circumstances and a student needs to ask for any kind of extension, then they should email the first year experience office at fye@tulane.edu. And the next question is, my daughter hasn't received any information on the items that were mentioned at the beginning, the things that she should be doing in May. So first of all, make sure she looks for an email from Tulane that gives her Tulane email account, and then the password comes in a separate email, just to keep those two things separate so it's secure. If she's been getting email from Tulane, but she hasn't gotten any information about the May modules, that information was presented in the newsletter from First Year Experience, and those are called the Navigator e-newsletters. And there was one sent, I believe, on May 6th, and then the second issue was sent yesterday. And again, if she's just not getting that information, then reach out to First Year Experience office. Then Heather, did College Advising send students a prompt about the advising process? Did you say that already, or is it all through the module?
We wanted to let First Year Experience and the Navigator kind of frame the process, because we put most of the information that students need now in the modules. But we did send an email kind of through Newcomb-Tulane College just on Friday of last week to students' Tulane address. I know some people have deposited later than others over this last few weeks as well. So if you are somebody who is a later depositor, it might be good to just check with admissions that everything is good there. And then also, and then again, that Tulane email,
Right.
every student has a Tulane email address. So that's really where, once that email address is real in our system, most of our kind of emails that go out to the whole first year class are going to go directly to the Tulane email.
Yes. And parents who were on our webinar last week heard me say this, but it becomes vitally important that students check their Tulane email all the time now. So that's considered the university's official way to communicate with the students. I do know from my colleague who manages the Navigator newsletters that they did kind of catch up and send that first newsletter to anybody who recently got in the system. And then that second one went out. So students should be getting those. So
I can
Um,
drop some links in as well, but I would need to, I need to stop sharing my screen for a
you know
minute.
what? I'll send them out in the follow-up
Okay.
e-newsletter.
Okay, I'll send them to you directly then, but we do have, the first year experience office does have a website with all of the same information on it.
Right.
And then, like I said, our advising incoming student page has the same, exact same information that we
Right.
sent out. And so the checklist, I'm seeing that question as well.
Yeah, so the parents and students can see the requirement checklist on the website. You'll see those links. It's referred to in the students module and it's on their overall transition checklist, the new student checklist. I'm not sure, Heather, if you mentioned this. I think that you did. Since the AP scores don't get reported until mid-July, how does that impact how they make their schedule this summer?
Yeah, that's a great question and something that we are pretty skilled at working with our students. So most of the time, we will ask that students just stay in the class that they're expecting credit for until they get their scores, and then they can kind of level up so they can go up to the next level if that's something they need, or they might say, oh, well, I don't need calc anymore, so maybe now I'll just use that space for this other class that I had discussed with the advisor. So we kind of have that conversation with them and kind of decide what's the best plan for that student at that time. Oftentimes it's really about student confidence. How did you feel about that test? Oh, I always get fives on my tests and it was no problem for me. Well, then maybe I would say, okay, we'll assume you have credit, but if you don't get credit, we need, we're going to probably ask them to change into the introductory class instead of the upper level class at that time. So we kind of talk about it, decide what's best for the moment, and then ask them to return to us if some new information comes into play later in July.
Okay, so one quick question is, will this presentation with the hyperlinks be sent to us? So yes. So you'll get a follow-up email in a couple of days, and it'll eventually be on the Family Programs webinar archive. So you'll be able to have all this information at your fingertips. Another question is, do TIDES classes count towards the 15 to 17 credits? And yes, they do. Most of them are 1 credit hour. The business school TIDES classes, I believe, are still like 1.5 credits. Is that still the case? Some of the TIDES courses, if they have a service learning component attached to it, then that carries an extra credit. But most of them are going to be 1 credit hour. They meet less frequently during the week, and so they have just 1 credit. Another question is, do they choose their TIDES classes during this process? How do you recommend they work through that long list of options? And my first recommendation is they should select several that interest them and not get completely attached to one particular topic. Many of the TIDES courses are, there is only 1 section of it. And so, that means they really should have some, several of them that appeal to them. Luckily, they've got such wonderful topics that's kind of easy to find. Heather, would you like to say anything else about TIDES
So
section?
this year and in previous years, this is the one class that, to make sure everybody has like equal access to the TIDES classes, we do open up just a few seats, not we, but the registrar kind of programs the system to open up just a few seats in every TIDES class throughout the time that we do registration. And so they will not be pre-registered in TIDES. If I could make a system that did that according to your students' hopes and dreams, I would. But it's important to know that like there's just going to be a few seats that open up, and those are going to be available to the students that register that day, and the few seats that open up the next day, and so forth, just to give everybody like equal chance to take yoga TIDES. Let your student know that only 15 people, 17 people are allowed in every TIDES class. So of 1,800 students of the incoming class, maybe not everybody's going to be in yoga tides, but that's where that flexibility comes in. And we'll just kind of, so part of that conversation is really just what's available today and what fits in our schedule today, and then what obviously do they also enjoy. It's only 1 hour a week, so while it's a great class to have a really good small connection to the professor, we could also work to find other classes that might connect to that interest or what drew them to that interest, because there's lots, it's usually just like a snippet of lots of other classes that Tulane offers.
So next, we have several questions that are about language placement.
Yeah,
So
usually do.
is there a placement exam? When do students take it? If so, how does it pre-registration for courses work with, regards to that? Where do they find all of that?
Yeah, so I'm really excited because I actually worked really closely with the instructional designer that built the May modules, and we made a cool little graphic for our language placement options. So I think the best way to give an overview of language is they can choose to start fresh with a language and just start at the first level. They need up to a third semester of proficiency in a language. So if they want to take Greek for the first time and they've never taken Greek in high school because your high school didn't offer it, most don't, then they can start at 1010, they'll move to 1020, they'll take 2030, and they'll be done with their language requirement. If a student has AP credit and has been working at a high level of Spanish or French, usually our 2 AP credits that are offered, they might test out of it altogether and never need to take a language placement exam. The language placement is literally for the students and the language that requires it. So have them follow the links in the modules to the language placement website. There's a list of languages that are laid out there, from Greek to Hebrew to Spanish to French to Portuguese, and have them look at the language or languages they're interested in. If their language requires a placement exam, then, and they know they want to take a language in their first or second semester, I highly recommend they go ahead and do that now before we work with them at registration, so we can kind of build that into our plan. So the placement exam is something that they start with, and the other student, if they place high enough on that placement exam, meaning they appear within the placement exam to be working at a higher level than our proficiency requirement at the third semester level, they're working even higher, then they will be given an opportunity during the semester of classes to take something called a proficiency exam in the language of their choosing. And so if they do the language proficiency exam, they might be able to test out of it altogether. So there's proficiency and then there's placement. Placement assumes that your student wants to take the language or try to test out of it. Proficiency means that they've placed high enough, they have a background in it, but they didn't have AP credit, they didn't have credit, but they definitely aren't interested in doing more language. They did a lot of that in high school and they're ready to move on, or they want to just try a new language for fun. So then they can take the proficiency exam and test out of it. I hope that's not too much in the weeds. Did that answer most of your questions that you see, Penny?
I think so, yes. And so they can email advising@tulane.edu if they have further questions about that, or the
They
student
can, and I can also supply you with a link to the placement website. It's just language.tulane.edu. Yeah.
Okay, let's go
And
into
that,
some other questions before we
okay.
finish our time.
Yep.
When will the students see their pre-filled registration schedule? Is that through the Gibson portal?
It will be through Gibson on the schedule of classes. So the schedule of classes can be logged into directly, and your student can just simply log into that, or they can go through Gibson and follow the link that says class registration. But yes, it will be in their Gibson portal. It will be anywhere that shows them their current schedule, but the class schedule registration system and Gibson are both places that you can see your current schedule. Your student will not necessarily be notified, but our plan right now is that we will finish that process in that very first week of June. And then the second week of June is when we begin our appointments. So it'll be around, give them a little time to think about what they like or don't like about what was dropped into their schedule and what questions they might have during their advising meeting with us.
Okay, let's go through a couple more questions. Let's see. So do students have a Tulane email address yet? So yes, they should already be assigned their Tulane email address. Once they commit, it's one of the first things that happens, but it does come in two separate emails. They get their username in one email and their password, and it's a temporary password that they can change to something of their choosing that they, can remember more easily. That comes in two different email messages. If they haven't, I will include in the follow-up email the contact information for information technology. If your student feels like they scoured through their personal email addresses that they used when they submitted their admission application, if they can't find that, they can also email help@tulane.edu. That is the contact for information technology. The student does have to be the one who follows up on that. Families can't do that for the student because just to keep everything safe, students are not supposed to share that information with anyone else, even a parent. So please keep that in mind. Another question is, where in the May module can you find the pre-registration sheet? I think we answered that. So it's not in the module. They log on to Gibson Online and they see how at College Advising has pre-registered into that starting point. Correct, Heather?
The pre-registration, once they're registered, is in Gibson, but in the modules is the survey or the registration worksheet that we collect information.
This person did
There's,
refer to it as the sheet. So
yes,
that is so it's a
there's,
pre-registration interest sheet. So
yes,
it's in the
yes,
module.
yeah.
So they should just carefully look through the module and look for that.
And don't worry, we will have students who show up and something went awry or there's things have changed since their admissions application, and that's fun. We've worked with all of you. We can continue to kind of piece it together if we need to make changes that are significant.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock. Heather, do you have a couple more minutes if we stay a little
I'm
longer
fine.
to answer a few more questions?
Happy to.
So one question was, if they already have some classes in mind, could they be conveyed ahead of pre-registration? They really just need to look at that pre-registration as a starting point and a foundation that they can build on. They'll still be able to make some changes and adjustments, correct?
That
Okay.
is correct. I definitely think it's great to have a list of classes that your student already has in mind. But once pre-registration happens, some of the availability will change a lot. So we're gonna work with that piece. So we'll have to kind of put together what's been pre-registered and what's on your student's wish list and kind of look at what's the best fit in that moment.
Do the students get randomly assigned their advising meetings in June and July, or did they sign up for it somewhere?
We are going to make it so they sign up. I've thought about random assignments, but that's going to be 1,800 different schedules. Sounds like hard to do. So we will be sending that first week of June. Our goal right now is to send links to the registration to sign up for the scheduled registration meeting, and you can expect the pre-registration to kind of happen in that first week of June.
So another question is, if a student attended a school that offers very few advanced placement courses, is it possible to take a course like calculus in the summer at a local community college to catch up and check that off of their requirements during one of their summers?
So, as I mentioned about pre-matriculation, so your student has now matriculated to Tulane. So the big thing is absolutely, if your student wants to take a summer class, absolutely. But we need to be careful with our transfer credit rules. So just know for all transfer credit for general classes like calculus needs to be from a 4-year accredited university. So community colleges and junior colleges don't usually fit the bill, but we do have a transfer credit specialist that will be one of the links that gets sent from our webinar. And you can have your student meet with that person to kind of verify that the school that they're looking at is going to work, because that, and does the department see the class they're taking as calculus as it would be at Tulane? Those are the important pieces to that question. So absolutely a great idea if your student has the energy for it after a busy senior year.
Another question, is there a list of courses that Freeman School of Business students are required to take prior to going abroad? Would you like to answer
Yeah, I
that?
don't have, there's some information that's gone back and forth. I think the best resource would be start with the catalog and to look at the prereqs and the business core classes that are required for that major. A majority of students try to finish something called the 30-10s. If you look at the major list, you'll see a lot of classes are numbered, marketing 30-10 or legal studies 30-10. There's not hard, fast rules. Your student who wants to go abroad has time to plan. I think the best advice is to be familiar with the catalog. And when they get here and once they get settled in, plan to meet with their business school advisor. They'll have a school advisor and our first year advising team, and we can walk them through kind of what's expected of them and what each semester will look like. But what's required to go abroad should be answered by the business school itself.
And I'll just let parents know that we've been having a family webinar about the business schools study abroad programs for the last couple of years. So we'll offer that again in the fall. And then the Newcomb-Tulane College Study Abroad Office and the Freeman School Study Abroad Office participate in a study abroad fair every fall. And so that's a really smart thing to attend for students who have any inkling that they might want to study abroad. So even if they think they won't do that into their junior year, it's a good thing to go to as a first year student and just to put that on their radar and start considering it and get familiar with the information and with those staff people and what the options are. So there's a lot of information on the on those websites too that students can examine. Let's see. If someone has been recently accepted off the wait list, but you haven't received financial aid information or other materials, I think the student can check in with their admission counselor. And then if they've got any questions about the deadline for finishing the modules, then I think they should email fye@tulane.edu. That's the first year experience staff. So,
If
let's
they're
see.
worried about advising, because you can make an appointment kind of like between that June 10th and July 12th, and because pre-registration has happened or will have happened at that point, it's pretty equitable across the playing field. So if your student needs a later appointment because it's just better for their schedule, or you're making some decisions, it's fine to like delay when you make the appointment, but registration is different than like when bills are due. So you can always register and go through the processes. And then if you decide not to come to Tulane, you just need to kind of make sure you drop the classes at the time that are appropriate. So
There's one question about how do we add our name to your email blasts? And I believe that means the family programs, e-newsletters, and another person mentioned this as well. So so if you have any concern at all, email families@tulane.edu. I receive a report of the students from undergraduate admission. Sometimes they might accidentally leave out your email address or accidentally make a keystroke error and misspell it. And so that might mean that you're not receiving it. Someone else said that they have reached out, and I did double check for someone earlier today. And so I can see if the email has been sent to you through my email service, but sometimes they're not opened. So you might want to check your spam folder and see if they're going, to a different folder or something. They're being diverted. So if you have any questions, you can email families@tulane.edu or call the office number that you see on the screen for my office. So, let's see, I think I'll try to take one more. So one question was not on this topic, but when they need to submit health insurance information, that information is on the student's checklist, their first year checklist. One thing I can't stress enough is to make sure your student is checking that frequently. I really recommend you kind of have a family powwow maybe every week and just kind of go through the checklist because it's set up chronologically. And so you can see that. I know that you can print it out, but it's really smarter to review it online on the website because it has hyperlinks to things. And so if they adjust a deadline for any reason, it'll be reflected in the live version of that checklist. And if there is something that's, something they have to submit, it'll click through to that portal where they have to submit something or to more detailed instructions. And so please make sure your student is looking on the first year experience website. They check that. That link to the checklist is always in their Navigator e-newsletter. And then I also mention those things in the family newsletters. For those of you who feel like you haven't seen the family newsletter, there's been one issue so far to the parents of this cohort of the incoming students. If your student was recently admitted or there was something wrong with their record or something, then you might be needing to catch up. But those are also the most recent ones are archived on the family website. So if you think you're missing something, you can look there, and that's just families.tulane.edu. And then you go to the communications tab and then look for the newsletter. So I think that we will close there. If you have any final comments that you want to make, let us know if this has been helpful. If you have feedback you want to give to us, you can email it to families@tulane.edu, and I'll share that with Heather if it's directly about this topic. I see a couple of little emoticons people are sending. That's nice. But we also really value your feedback. If you have suggestions about this topic, or if you have suggestions for other topics, then, please send us those. I really appreciate hearing that. It helps us continually refine what we're offering. There will be more webinars later this summer. This Thursday, there is another one being offered that's about accessibility at Tulane. And that can be a really important one for families to understand. There are differences in what is offered and required between the K through 12 experience and the university level experience. So that's really important. Even if your student has received accommodations in the past, it's really good to tune into this webinar. You can register for it live or watch the video recording later, but that's a really important one coming up. So I think then if there are no more comments to submit, then we will thank you for your attention and your interest in this tonight, and tell you that we are so excited that your family is becoming part of the Tulane community, and we wish great things for your student, and we know that they're going to get a wonderful experience, broadening their education, deepening their knowledge of things, and having all kinds of things to explore between all of the different courses that are offered. So we wish them really good luck. And I can't stress enough what Heather said about encouraging your students to be flexible and open-minded and patient. Because if they get really anxious about getting everything just perfect, also they need to wrap their brains around having early classes as well as ones that are in the late afternoon. They have to be kind of willing to be flexible about those things as well. So help them kind of go into it with an open mind about flexibility. And I think that they'll have a lot of success in getting through the process. So thank you again to everyone. And Heather, thank you so much for all of your time and attention and all the good information that you shared with everyone tonight. So thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you for having me. And if you need anything at all or have follow-up questions, I know there are a few questions needed still. You can email me or advising@tulane. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.